Yeah, on all of our behalf, we just want to say thank you to everyone. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, congratulations, and just on behalf of all of us, once again, thank you so much for the example. Okay, now we have the approval of the minutes, and we have quite a few sets of minutes tonight. I recommend we move and pass them as a block unless anybody has any additions or corrections for any of them. All right, if not, is there a motion to approve in block?
I'll approve in block, assuming anyone who was absent is abstaining.
Okay.
Second.
So it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Mr. Cohen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes all pass, and now we come to announcements, and I'll start on my right with Ms. Niedergang. Any announcements for tonight?
No announcements.
Mr. Cohen, any announcements?
I do not have any announcements.
Ms. Krummeller? Ms. Quinn?
Just that the weekly newsletter that the mayor sends out, which is required reading for Princeton residents since it has a lot of news about what the governing body is doing, has been expanded to include a council corner, which council members will be adding to. So you can subscribe to that weekly newsletter, which comes out Friday afternoons from the municipal website, princetonnj.gov.
I do have an announcement. The Youth Advisory Committee has organized an event that they have titled Middle School Milestone. It's going to be held on January 31st at 10 a.m. at John Witherspoon's Middle School, and it's going to be for 7th graders. And through a series of skits and Q&A session, the members of the YAC will be giving advice and tips to the middle school students on how to navigate their emotional well-being. And this will include tips on social media versus reality, managing social and academic activities, peer pressure, and relationships. And since the students have all been in their shoes at one time, they hope to approach these topics in a relatable and comprehensible way for the students. And I would ask any parents that have 7th graders at the middle school, if after the 31st, if you can please follow up with them and get some feedback, and hopefully if they were paying attention, that you can have that discussion with them. Thank you.
Just a couple quick announcements. First of all, the Witherspoon-Jackson Neighborhood Association will be having their first meeting of the year on Saturday, January 19th at 9:30 a.m. at First Baptist Church. And the second announcement is on Thursday, January 24th at 10 a.m., Habitat for Humanity will be having a groundbreaking ceremony at 31 Lytle Street for 2 new affordable housing units.
Great, thank you. All right, I have a few announcements myself. First, I wanted to thank the Princeton Police and all of the emergency services groups and our partners at Princeton University, surrounding municipalities, our county, state, and federal law enforcement partners for their help in preparing for Saturday's protests and for providing a safe environment for everybody to march. In the end, for everybody who was down there, it was really a wonderful expression of community solidarity. And Princeton sent a loud and clear message that we stand for love over hate. And I also want to thank Princeton's merchant community. Many members are here tonight for stepping up in every conceivable way. I want to give a special thanks to the Nassau Inn. And I want to thank you all for standing in solidarity with the counter-protesters, too. A lot of people put up really creative window displays, and it was, I think, just like a heartwarming day to be a Princetonian and be in town, even though it was expensive all around. So I do want to thank everybody for coming together as a community and showing the world who we really are. Other announcements on Friday, the 18th this week, I have Meet the Mayor open office hours in the Princeton Public Library lobby at 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then on Monday, January 21st is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Municipal offices will be closed, but recycling will still be picked up. And there's going to be a community breakfast at the Arts Council. And are there any staff announcements? Nope. Okay. Do we have the birthday boy here for the proclamation? No? All right. We're going to have to. All right. We'll hold off on that for a little while. Okay. So just a note about tonight's meeting, because I know there's a lot of folks here. We do have parking is the main item on the agenda, but we have a couple other really important ordinance introductions tonight. So we just want to make sure we keep moving through the agenda in an efficient way so we can hear from as many people as possible. But I do want to open it up now for public comment for any items that are not already on the agenda. And we'll start with the sign-up sheet, and then I'll open it up to anybody else. So we'll start with Danielle Cadet.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Danielle Cadet. I'm here from the World Mission Society Church of God, representing ASES, which is the university student group for volunteerism. So I think we came on pretty much the perfect night because the boys were here who really helped out in the community. So that's exactly what we're looking to do more of in Princeton. We're looking to do a lot more community service work. We had the great opportunity to do a cleanup in Marquardt Park, and we came here with the video to show you guys actually what happened and all the awesome things that were that came out of that cleanup. So we're just here introducing ourselves again and to show you the results. Okay.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
We really appreciate all of your help from the last year's cleanup, and I think we have a meeting set up with Councilman Cohen and myself to figure out if there's another project for you guys to help out in the community with, but that's terrific. And
awesome.
We're very appreciative.
And then we also have our last thing that we're going to have a Future Leaders Forum on January 23rd. And I do believe Mr. Cohen is going to join us that day to help inspire more community service acts from university students and from young people in general to get them out into the community and be involved and do great things like we saw tonight.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. And then next is Mike Pizarro.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Mike Pissarro. I'm the Policy Director for the Watershed Institute. I want to take just a brief opportunity. I understand that the Council considered in closed session the purchase of some open space. We fully support such a purchase, and we are working with the neighbors, other organizations to accomplish that. But I want to sort of set out reasons in general that open space and preservation of property is important, and in particular, this particular piece. In many instances, our headwaters aren't really protected by our regulations and statutes that are enforced by the Department of Environmental Protection. Once those headwaters, the source of our streams and wetlands, are gone or filled in or degraded, that really has a ripple effect downstream. So acquisition of these kinds of properties protect water quality, protect quantity of water, provide, in many instances, habitat for threatened and endangered species, provide natural corridors for animals to travel. And those corridors are becoming fewer and fewer. So when we have an opportunity to protect that, to protect our wetlands who act as filters and sponges of stormwater and other pollution, we should take that. So again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I urge you, the municipality, if it is able to help in preservation of open space, and in particular this lot, but elsewhere in general. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to any item that's not already on the agenda? Nope, seeing no one. We'll close public comment then and move on to reports. And our first report tonight is on the food waste program. And did I see Mr. Huff here? Oh, there you are. For those of you who don't know, this is Bob Huff, who's our Director of Infrastructure and Operations.
If you don't mind, I'll just start, Mayor. I just wanted to provide an update of the current status of our food waste program. As council is aware, over the last several years, we have been working diligently to provide this service to our residents, including one of the things in winning the Bloomberg Challenge is really trying to provide, the best way to provide this service to our residents. Unfortunately, we have run into some difficulties, including our current waste provider in terms of their services they're providing us have not been adequate. Things like just the delivery, we have not been able, pickup of the waste. In addition, we have not been able to, the hauler has not been able to ensure that the waste is being, or the food waste is being provided to a farm to be turned into compost. In addition to that, what we have in the last couple of weeks, our food waste contract has come up. We went out for bid. We received bids. The only bid we received back was from our current hauler, who is not providing the best service right now, and the price came back doubled from the current site price. Based on that, we're making a recommendation that the food waste program we suspend it for 90 days, in which we will look into providing a better way of providing that service to the residents. We're going to look at a number of alternatives, one including seeing whether municipal staff can actually do the waste removal, and finding a location to actually have it then converted into compost through a farm or another facility. So we expect to check back in with those participants in about 90 days with a new plan. We'll go out for bid. So currently, the waste program will be effective through the end of January, or will be the last pickup the end of January. We'll take a short suspension while we work diligently to revamp the program and reinvent the program, and we hope to be back on track sometime this spring with a program we hope that's better and provide all the things that we're looking for in an organics waste program.
The only thing I want to add to that is we actually had received 2 bids. The lowest bidder is non-responsive with their bid. There was a missing document, which is basically, in this case, a fatal flaw, and his reason for rejection. And as Mark said, the other bidder would have more than doubled the price that we currently have. So it is, we think, in our best interest to go back, look at the program, look at the way it's collected, the way it's way people register, the way the bookkeeping's done, right on down to where the food waste is taken and processed. So we've already started contacting DEP on some thoughts. So we think that a 90-day window gives us ample time to sort of reprogram ourselves.
And I would like to set up a meeting where we invite all the participants and anybody else from the community that's interested, and we can give a briefing in a bit more detail about what we're thinking about options for moving forward. We really are. I want to send the message loud and clear that we're really committed to this program, and we're hoping that this is actually an opportunity to restructure it in a way that's going to work better in the long run. So we want to make sure we're communicating with everybody. And to that end, we did send out an email to all the participants we had emails for, but there are many participants we don't have emails for. So I just want to make sure there's a hard copy letter going out to them, or there's some sort of communication that we've thought out so that people aren't putting their bucket out on Wednesday and not getting it picked up.
They're also being notified.
They are, great.
Yep.
Any other
Well,
questions?
it's getting picked up this Wednesday.
It's the last pickup will be on January 30th. Okay. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay. Yep.
The only other thing is that we'll be back in 2 weeks at the meeting on the 28th. You will have to take a formal action to reject those bids that night. We wanted to talk about it first tonight, and then we'll come back in 2 weeks with a resolution where you will formally reject the bids that we received.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. All right, and now we'll move on to council reports, and I'll start once again, all right, with Ms. Niedergang.
No reports.
No? Mr. Goat?
I have 2 reports. First, I wanted to report from the Historic Preservation Commission one item that's been on HPC's agenda in recent months will be coming to council for final disposition. The engineering department has requested some deviation or a deviation from the approved Nassau streetscape redesign for technical and cost reasons. And they've been having difficulty reaching a resolution with a subcommittee of HPC charged with reviewing the changes. After consultation with Edgemere of council to HPC, it was agreed that the governing body has authority to take jurisdiction of this matter, which is time sensitive as it impacts the Bank Street resurfacing project. Look for more information in your agenda packets for the January 28th meeting, and feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to hear further details about the decisions that need to be made. The second report is on a meeting of the Central Jersey Transportation Forum that I attended last week as council delegate. In preparation for that meeting, I actually had a meeting with Mayor Lempert and with Ralph Widener, who's our local expert on transportation. And at the previous meeting of the forum, one of the steering committee members had asked for direction from the municipalities that comprise the forum or that contribute to the forum as in terms of what goals we should be setting for the forum going forward. Ralph had suggested that we get an update to a 2010 regional development plan for the Route 1 corridor, which details smart growth strategies to enhance the economic vitality of the region as a whole, while managing transportation needs to result in minimal increases in congestion and climate-friendly emissions reductions. We've made little progress toward achieving most of the goals of the study, largely due to obstructive policy positions held by the former governor's office until last year. Changes in transportation technology in the intervening years make an update to the plan imperative, but changes in local growth patterns from what was anticipated may also contribute to revised recommendations and conclusions. A committee was formed to flesh out the needs to be addressed in the update to the plan, and both Ralph and I are likely to serve on that committee. Action may be required by council as we work to identify priorities of most importance to Princeton.
I had just a couple reports. The first one is continues to be an annoying report from New Jersey Transit about the Dinky. I just received a copy of a letter today. So New Jersey Transit has technically finished the positive train control work that they've needed to in order to meet the deadline, but they said in this letter actually that they haven't been able to get confirmation of that because of the federal shutdown. Meanwhile, they say that they need to continue to use the engineers from the Dinky because they've been working on positive train control, they've gotten behind with all their other regular maintenance work. So there's been a coalition of us who continue to meet with them. I have to say Assemblyman Dan Benson has been very helpful. He's the chairman of the Transportation Committee for the State Assembly. He's been convening meetings. He's gotten most of the high-powered people from New Jersey Transit there, but they will not commit yet. So we had a meeting, the last phone meeting was on December 31st, actually at about 4 p.m. And we're hoping to have another call in next week, and hopefully we'll have better news then. But I wish I had better news to report on that front. Council had a productive goal setting session first week of January, and hoping that we'll have a draft set of goals at an upcoming meeting, either on the 28th or the first meeting in February. And are there any staff reports? Ms. Stockton?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give some construction updates from various entities that are doing work in Princeton currently. First are two updates related to Mercer County improvements. The first one being utility relocation work on Alexander Street was set to begin today. That is approximately 4 weeks of alternating traffic on Alexander Street to relocate utility poles and the electrical lines associated with those. The alternating traffic is from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on weekdays, anticipated for 4 weeks, as I said. Beginning then on February 14th, PSE&G will be looking to close the roadway and the sidewalk during those same hours, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on weekdays, to facilitate the work that is closer to the existing truss bridge. And so that will not allow for even pedestrian movement through that workspace. And all of this work is in advance of the bridge replacement project slated for later this fall. The other county project that's now wrapping up in Princeton is on Cherry Valley Road. They have one last work item, which is bridge railing with their contractor. I've been pushing to get confirmation that they'll stay within the end of January as the date to reopen the roadway. Unfortunately, they haven't gotten confirmation back from their contractor. So as soon as I have more information, I can submit that to Mr. DeShield for the weekly news bulletin. Three other construction projects that are ongoing. Princeton Fire and Rescue have started work at their site across the street at the Valley Road site. Beginning on Monday the 21st, the eastbound lanes of Terhune Road between U.S. Route 206 and Mount Lucas will be closed. That is the first step towards a permanent closure of that one block section of Terhune Road. The idea is that the land on both sides of Terhune Road is consolidated and in use for the first aid and rescue headquarters. We've also had a meeting recently with PSE&G Gas. They are in the second phase of a gas service modernization program. They've submitted plans to replace 41,000 feet of pipe in Princeton. That includes 600 services. Not all of that length is on municipal roads. Some is on private roads, some is on university, other on county, and also state. So there is a portion on Nassau Street and Princeton-Kingston Road. So they are looking to have an open house with the community on March 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Monument Hall. We'll be putting up the information on our website. PSE&G will be also contacting all of their customers within those project areas to come and take part in this open house. Work is expected to begin in April. As I get more information, I'll share that. And then lastly, the water company is looking to come back on Wednesday this week to complete their work on for the Red Hill Road water main replacement. What needs to take place is they need to get into Cherry Hill Road again, just north of 206, and they will be doing alternating traffic. It's a day to a 2-day shutdown while they're alternating traffic. While they're doing that, they're also going to complete a side path for the town from 206 up to the Unitarian Church driveway. So that will be wrapped up as well this week. So that's my update.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sounds like you've been busy. Any other staff reports? No? All right. Is the birthday boy here yet or still not here?
Mr. Kaiser has not.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so we have a new section of our agenda for correspondence. The first is from the Spirit of Princeton, and for those of you who've been on council for a while, this is sort of bittersweet because normally Ray Wadsworth would come and present these, but this is a calendar for 2019. It's in the agenda packet for the Memorial Day Parade, Flag Day, and Veterans Day, and Ray would always come and ask us to waive the fees for those events, and just want to make sure that we're happy to carry on with that tradition of waiving the fees. Excellent, thank you. And then there's also a a draft letter in there supporting gold safe routes to school municipal recognition. And I just want to ask Ms. Stockton, is this something that's important for us to send in order to qualify for some sort of funding, or is it just like a general letter of support? I mean,
It's a recognition of all the efforts that the school district and the various schools have been doing to increase walking and mainly walking to our schools.
Okay.
And it's a nice recognition to have for the efforts of the volunteers and the PTOs.
I see. Okay. So I think maybe some details needed to be filled in there as well, but I think that I assume general council support for sending those letters. So
I think there's general support.
Yes, great. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the work session now on parking. And I just wanted to start by outlining the framework of how the work session is going to be organized tonight. So we do have a big crowd here, which is great, and we want to be able to structure the session so that we can hear from as many people as possible, and also give council time to discuss and take action. So first, I just wanted to let everybody know that we've heard from many of you, and we understand that there's frustration with the new system. And we're going to be tonight we'll be going over some of the steps that we've already taken to address the concerns that we've heard. And we'll be deciding upon some steps that council can take tonight or at an upcoming meeting. And then we'll be outlining next steps for the upcoming months. And in a minute, I'm going to hand it over to Mark DeShield, our town administrator, and Deanna Stockton, our municipal engineer, to give us an update on the recent changes to the system that have already been implemented, and also update us on proposed changes that are on the table for tonight and in the near term. And after that update, we'll have questions and comments from council. Then we'll open it up for public comment. We'll start with the sign-up sheet that was on the podium, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who'd like to speak. And that will be, we hope we can hear your suggestions during that period. Then we'll bring it back to council to decide on what our next steps will be. Deanna did prepare a presentation, but given there's so many people who signed up to speak, I think we're going to hold off on the presentation for now. We'll put it up on the website, and then if we have time, we'll hear it, or if it's going to answer some of the questions that we're hearing from people who are speaking, then we can hear it. But I do hope that we can run this as efficiently as possible. So we have the sign-up sheet for people who signed up ahead of time. If you didn't sign this up and you want to speak, after you speak, if you could come to the table and just sign your name on the sheet on the table, and that lets make sure that we get your name spelled correctly in the minutes, and it just helps the clerk's office a lot. And then before turning it over, I just wanted to reiterate that the ultimate goal of the whole parking effort is to have a parking system that makes the best use possible of the parking infrastructure that we already have. So there was a Nelson Nygaard study that's up on the internet, and it found that we have a lot of parking spots, especially in the parking garages and in the periphery, that were going empty and underutilized. So the goal of the new system is to actually encourage more people to come into town, because it'll be easier to find a space and more convenient to pay. And the idea is to incentivize people to park in the garage and incentivize people to park in those spots that are further out from the center core, because the more people who we can get to park in those areas, the more availability there will be in the prime on-street spots. So that's the goal. We know we still have some work to do, and we welcome community input, because the whole point of this is though it works better for the community. So I do want to thank all of you for coming out tonight and for your engagement on this issue with us, and we are committed to getting it right. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mark and Deanna.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll start. I'm going to ask Ms. Stockton if she could just go over through a brief overview of the changes that we made in response to what we received from our residents. Again, this is a continuous improvement process, and we'll continue to do that. So I'll let Ms. Stockton start.
Thank you to all of you that have provided comments on the parking system. We can only get better by hearing from all of you. One thing we ask before I start is if you can, when you see things that are amiss with the system, please report it through SeeClickFix to us, or on our website there's a contact form that if it's not a hardware issue but just a question or a statement of displeasure, that helps us. Yes, we monitor all the social media, but it's much more helpful for us if you direct it to us. And as much as you can give us details of meter number, time, date, that is extremely helpful as well. Vague statements are more challenging for us to address. So in regards to the meter system and changes that we've made since it was put in place, one of the largest complaints we heard upon launch of the system was coin jams, and that the meters were not accepting payment using coin, and people didn't understand what the situation was. And so what it actually is are the coin boxes on the meters are smaller. We had a situation with our meter vendor that we did not receive all of our coin collection canisters that we were supposed to have with the meters. It took a week longer to get those. So there was a period of time where the coin boxes got full. We did not have any mechanism to go out and collect the money. Therefore, coin jams were showing up, or there were issues, trying to put money in and money wasn't going in. So once we got those collection canisters, our parking department jumped right on it. They've done a very good job of modifying their schedule. These new meters are great because they do tell us when they are full. They do tell us when they're approaching full. But again, to hear from the public for a specific location and a specific meter, that's great for us to hear. You'll still see some jams. We see it on our system at the 30-minute meters because those meters are more active and there is more turnover. And so again, our parking department is adapting, and they are changing their collection schedules to accommodate this changing system. But I think right now we're 44 days into the new parking system. So we are all still adapting in-house as well. Another issue, a big issue we know, was with the app. The app had issues at the beginning. It did not allow for prepayment. We did, as well as at our meters. Prepayment got addressed on December 4th with an update on the app. It then was updated at individual meters by December 12th. So there was a delay on accepting prepayment. Another provision that made our system a little more challenging is the setting in place of a credit card minimum. As you often go into different businesses, you will see that they will not accept a transaction less than, say, $5. We implemented something like that similar on the parking meters, and it was $1. But based on all the feedback we were getting and the issues we were hearing about people trying to end parking stays on the app for parking, what we decided that is if we could get rid of that or lower that credit card minimum, it would go a long way to change those issues and get rid of those issues. So as of January 4th, we reduced the credit card minimum fee on the app so that you can stay for as little as 10 or 20 minutes depending on the zone you're in. And then on the meters, the change went into effect, I think, over this weekend. And again, that's been dropped to 50 cents. So on the areas with the meters, the parking stay is now down to a minimum of about 20 minutes. So it's all in our attempt to make all of these technological changes a little easier for everybody. I covered the parking prepayment, visibility of the meters, and what to do with the meters in the dark, and the raining situations. Yes, these are different meters from what we had before. The angle of the screen is different. Because they accept credit card payment, you do have to take action of pushing buttons, where the old meters, you put in the coin and your time just shows up. And more coins, more time, and the same when you use the smart cards, it just added time. Now with credit card payment, you need to push buttons. You have to figure out how to get your card in there, and then you have to push buttons. So we've been working quite a bit with the vendor. The vendor says, you know, we've had 300,000 installations of these meters in places like Anchorage and Boston, and we've never come across these issues. And so, so we've been working with them to see what can be done. Actually, before the meeting tonight, I went out and checked some meters, and I found one on Paul Robeson that wasn't lighting up when I pushed a button. So I've now reported that through SeeClickFix, and we've got it to the vendor to correct. So I snapped a picture of it and sent it off. So we're trying to do changes like that. The meters also, because they're smart meters and they have more battery requirement, they're not going to constantly stay lit up. So they are now set, but previously we had set them that they would only light up during hours of parking operation. But then people were getting confused about the meters not doing anything. So what we've now done is we've extended the time. So if you push a button on the meter or put a coin in or stick a credit card in, if it's before the payment hours, it's going to come up and say free parking. Or if it's after the payment hours, it'll say free parking. But otherwise, if there's no activity, nobody touching it, it will be a darker screen. And this is just, it's a matter of saving battery and trying to balance having a visual reminder or a cue to people, but recognizing the limitations of battery technology at this time. Back to the prepayment, I just wanted to touch on that because the visibility reminded me of it. If you're in a parking area that's 30 minutes, the prepayment option only starts 30 minutes before the parking times of operation. So our hour starts at 9 o'clock. Starting at 8:30, you can do a prepayment for the 9 to 9:30 time. The same with then the other meters, the 2-hour through all-day meters, all work on a 2-hour prepayment window. So as early as 7 o'clock, you can go to any meter or pay station and prepay for your stay. And the same is true on the app as well. So I just wanted to highlight those improvements that we've made up to this time. Mark, please, if you can think of any I've forgotten, please remind me.
One thing that I wanted to go through at this point is to walk council through and the public through the implementation timeline, which I think will give some perspective on some of the pain points in the implementation process. This process started October 9th with the pay station replacements began at that point. By October 15th, we began cutting poles. This process was not initially part of the installation. It was identified to staff that in the next year or two, that we would have to lower the height of the poles to meet ADA requirements. As a result, we needed to then cut the poles. So that process started on the 15th with our staff. We were trying to get ahead of the installers so that once we cut, they had places to put it in. Unfortunately, the installer started on the 23rd and quickly fell behind schedule. By them falling behind schedule, there was a mismatch between our cutting the poles and the actual installation of the meters. November 5th, the actual system went live. However, on November 5th, not all of the meters were in place at that time. There were still some meters that were not installed on November 5th. It wasn't until November 8th that we had finally all of the meters physically installed. Between November 8th and November 14th, there was a quality assurance and quality control measures completed, which constituted the final piece of installation for the meters. The contract required that all of the project be done by November 5th. Because the vendor failed to do so, the municipal attorney has demanded the liquidated damages in accordance with the contract of $500 a day for the 9 days that the system was not operational. In addition, one thing I just wanted to talk about a little bit, we're still early on with the system. It provides us a lot more data that we can use to do analysis. Still early on, so we have some data that we can kind of glean some information from. So I wanted to kind of pull out some of that data just to provide. One is the use of the app. It exceeded what we expected it to. We've seen a steady increase in the number of parking sessions via the app from 4,800 in November to 7,521 in December. And we see a real use in those parking sessions. We also saw the number of actual users increase from November to December from 13,883 to 1,941. And those encourage that people are actually using the app. As we said, there were some issues in the beginning. We continue to try to improve that process. We're also encouraged, part of the process was also to kind of see more people in the garage to promote more turnover for longer stays. And we have seen that with little, again, this is very little data we have, but it's interesting. We see, if you compare 2017 to 2018, the increase in the number of vehicles using the garage from November to December. In November, it was 39,113, and in December, 39,527, an increase of, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. This is for November. If we compare 2017 to 2018, we see an increase of 414 vehicles going out of the garage, which is the direction that we wanted to see. We definitely need more data to make sure that that is still occurring. And then if you look at December 2017 to 2018, we had 41,631 vehicles, and that increased to 42,570, over 800 additional vehicles. And again, that shows some positive movements in the direction that we wanted to move. At this point, and I think we can just, I'm going to ask Deanna to just kind of talk about what are the next steps in the process, and then we can have additional discussion.
Deanna, did you talk about the money back, though? That we also made the change that the people could stop their parking session and get the money back? Because that happened, didn't it?
Yes, that was always part of the system, but because we had that $1 credit card minimum, you had to achieve the minimum parking stay to cover the $1 minimum credit card fee before you could get a refund.
Okay.
And so by reducing that down to, a stay of 12 minutes, 20 minutes, then you have more opportunities to see that return.
I have a quick question for Mark as well. The numbers comparing November to December parking sessions at the meters. Is that corrected for the fact that the system wasn't up and running until well into November? That was the last numbers you gave, but you also gave numbers about meter sessions and right, but it didn't. You didn't really take into account that there were few parking days in November. Yeah.
I have some questions about how the wallet application works on the app. Can you go over that a little bit? Oh. Can Deanna maybe?
Yes, I can do
Thanks.
that. That has also been much discussed, and unfortunately, at the beginning of the process, it was explained that the app would allow you to only pay one transaction fee if you loaded a wallet. We have since found, and actually it was corrected at a council meeting a few months ago, that that is not the case. The way the wallet actually works is it limits the amount of the credit card fees for the municipality, but a transaction fee is still charged by the app company to pay for the convenience of using the app. So the convenience fee goes with parking sessions, not with wallets. So whether you pay through the app on a credit card or on a wallet, you're still paying the convenience fee every time you park.
Which is collected by the app company, not by Princeton.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I had a question on that. Is that something that changed? Because when it was presented to us, I understood that that wasn't going to be the case.
Yes, early on, we heard a different story, but by the time we entered into the contracts with the company, the information had been corrected.
Corrected by the company or?
By our consultant, yes.
Okay.
I do want to say that earlier today, Ms. Kremler and myself and Ms. Stockton and Mr. DeShield, we did have a call with Passport, and we explained to them the consternation this has caused our community because we had been told one thing and then it switched. They seemed maybe open to talking with us. They seemed to want the municipality to be the ones to cover all the costs, and I'm not sure if we're going to get them to lower their cost, but I think it's worth having a conversation with them and we can see where it goes. But we explained that this was causing friction and that we had other choices for other apps to go to as well. So maybe they'll, I think they want us as a customer, so I'm hopeful that maybe we can work out a better deal for the town with them.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth reviewing, since we've heard so much about Park Mobile as opposed to Passport, the specific reasons why we chose Passport regarding permitting and other, the ability for merchants to validate. So if you could just summarize the thinking that went into the choice of Passport versus Park Mobile.
Right, so Passport had some advantages for us that worked well for Princeton, including, as you mentioned, the digital permitting. It allows us to get away from the paper applications and hang tag system that we currently have for all of our permits, whether they're residential, high school, employee permits. We are able to use their platform to do this digitally. So we're no longer restricted to the Monday through Friday 9 to 5 hours for application for permits. It can also help us with the guest permit situation. Instead of people calling in to police, they have the ability to just go online and request a guest permit once we work through the specifics of how that will happen in the future. Also, the wallet was a big feature as well for us. It gives us the opportunity to transfer the smart card balances for people, and a lot of other vendors did not offer a wallet option. We're also able to use it for enforcement as well. We're able to combine both the information from the meters and the information from mobile payments into a platform supported by the app manufacturer, and that's what enables our parking enforcement officers to be able to efficiently check for parking sessions.
One other thing that I think was a tool that we heard that people wanted to look at was the merchant validation as another option that we didn't see in any of the other platforms.
And do we have any data on whether the merchants have used that feature, or?
I think we only had one person that had signed up for it, but as we've worked through the process, we think that they meant to sign up for a wallet instead of a merchant validation. Am I right, Christina? Yes, she's shaking her head. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
No, not really at this time.
Just had one follow-up question on the permits, the digital permits. Would that include for when there's guests parking overnight on the street?
Yes, definitely.
Thanks.
Ms. Kremler?
I just want to make one point. That's some of the things that we will be looking to, so we're clear. It's part of the next steps that we'll be doing is going through those, evaluating, and coming up with the final answer of how that would work. So I just want council to understand it's something we haven't dealt with yet in the public, but we will be dealing with it in the future.
So and this app, is it better, or is it the only one that we could do the shared parking, or did Park Mobile offer that also, where we can arrange to do, the shared parking arrangements? Do you know? That wasn't one of the deciding factors? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they cannot do it, the shared parking. It was one of the things that did attract us to it. We are looking at some of the other apps and seeing if what our alternatives are, but at this point I'm not sure.
And did we find out if we could use two at the same time? We did, or we have not found that out. Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions from council before you open it up?
I just had one other question, and that was related. I don't know if we addressed it on grace periods. Are we going to be addressing that? I know we had a lot of questions about that.
Should I answer that one? I mean, this is something that I hope that council considers tonight. I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. So there's a way to, and this is what Nelson Nygaard suggested, is to build in, the old system gave you that 8 minutes at the end, to build it at the front end. And another way to think about that is to just lower the rate for the first hour. So I would like to see council consider in the 2 hour zone charging $1.75 for that first hour, and then it would be $2.25 for the second hour. And you could look at it either as you're getting a little bit of time up front for free, or you could look at it just the first hour is less expensive. The other thing is that when we move to, and I think this is on one of the next steps, is that there's license plate reader technology for enforcement, and there's ways to build in grace period times on that on the enforcement end. So there's definitely the tools, and I'm not sure if that's something that would come through council or would be done administratively. But there's The enforcement up to this point has been relatively light. If anybody's been downtown and has made a mistake with the new meters, you probably received a warning and not a ticket, and that was intentional because we're realizing that everyone's getting used to the system. That's now changed, so it is important to put money in the meters. If you've gotten a few warnings, don't assume that the warnings are going to continue.
So another question about the app. If I pay for an hour in a 2-hour spot, my understanding is using the app I can add an hour to my session. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thanks. And I like the mayor, I think we should give serious consideration to, I know that both Nelson Nygaard and Dixon talked about this variable rate, progressive rate structure, and if I'm remembering, Dixon's recommendation was it was too much change and too confusing at the beginning, and I think we've gone through a period of great confusion at this point, so I echo Mayor Lempert's call for serious consideration of 175 and then going up to the 225.
Ms. Cormiller, and then Ms. Niedergang.
And then the one other item on the list is that the meters and the app don't directly speak to each other, so that it doesn't show, if you've paid on the app, the meter shows that it's expired. And I think we were talking about getting the necessary technology so that that's no longer the case. Are we talking about that, or what's going on with that?
We have met with the meter vendor, and the current battery technology will not support that type of activity on a sustained basis. I think they were giving us recommendations of anywhere from a day to a week that you would be replacing batteries. And so with 600 meters, that's quite an investment.
I just wanted to be sure that when we revisit this issue again in the future, that we have some comparative data from, like, the data we've seen so far has been from November and December of this year. I'd love to see data from end of 2017, and of course as we go forward, so when we come back to revisit the impact of parking, that we really see, and maybe that's par for the course, but we haven't seen it yet, so I definitely want to see that going forward.
One of the challenges that we have is the previous system did not provide this data, and that's why we have to have some time to see what the 2018, end of 18 and 19 data looks like.
Got it. Thank you.
We have to just extrapolate from our revenues, parking revenues.
Okay.
Okay. If council's willing to take a break from our questioning at this moment, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt the work session to go back to the proclamation because Helmut Schwab has arrived, and I don't want to keep you up too late. So we do have a birthday proclamation for Helmut Schwab, and I'm going to come down there so I can give it to you in person. So I do have a really long proclamation here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. But we did want to honor Helmut. Maybe we'll sing happy birthday to him too. It was just Helmut's 90th birthday, and Helmut Schwab is a hero for Princeton's open space. He was instrumental in the Institute land. I see former Mayor Marchand here. Is Bob Kaiser still here too? Oh, there's Bob Kaiser, yeah. So you see all the people who come back, who had the pleasure of having a chance to work with Helmut. Helmut Schwab also had the vision of a path across the Stony Brook, a bridge across the Stony Brook that would be a major connector of a missing link along that pathway system. And there's a beautiful pedestrian bridge. I think it's probably most beautiful in September or October or in the spring, unless you like the snow. So I would encourage you all to go out there in the spring. It's really beautiful and just a really special place to walk. And it's just our thank you to Helmut for everything that you've done for the town. And we're excited to celebrate your birthday with you. So happy birthday. And I actually stepped on my line because I looked at the bottom of this, and this is actually Helmut Schwab Day. So I want to give this to you on Helmut Schwab Day, and happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just say that I'm deeply grateful that my life allowed me to come to Princeton and live here. And on a larger scale, it is how our democracy works. I had the fortune to live in Switzerland for a long time, and they have an outstanding democracy, constitution and all that. In America, it's a little different. The top end, our President Trump and the present closure of our government may put question marks behind our dogs. But on the level, on the working level, like a town like Princeton, it's outstanding, unbelievable how so many citizens are personally involved in the life of the city. They do this or that or otherwise. There are numerous committees you can participate in, and of course you can write letters. But it's unbelievable how our democracy works. Allow me to quickly mention what I've seen. When I retired, I worked for Habitat for Humanity. Hey, what do I find? The city I live in does not have a Habitat house. It didn't take very long, and we had 2 Habitat houses. There was some problem with the water running. Our engineer in no time found the solution, and the houses were built, and they were occupied. Hey, then for some reason, I don't know why, after doing the Institute lands, I was asked through here to do the Shade Tree Commission. And what that is, you look after the trees along the streets. And it's my learning as a businessman, when you do something, maybe you do it as it was done before, but it's better if you ask yourself, what do you want to accomplish and how can it be done better? So the Shade Tree Commission did not have a mission statement, what it wanted to do and how it wanted to do. They just put trees there. I said, get the people involved where the tree is supposed to go. Ask them what tree they want. And that worked well, with one exception. One lady said, I don't want a tree because I have the view. But then our tree planters came and put the tree there. And she took her broom, raced the house, and beat them till they run away, and she had no tree. So that is it. Then I was on the ethics committee, and we now have an ethics statement, how our committees and all this, ethically, how they should run. And then, of course, it came, Ron Berlin came to me. Is he there by chance? No, he's not here. He is an outstanding citizen of Princeton. He said, Helmut, you have to come to the meeting. They want to build houses and this and that, and we want open space. And after we had open space, then it occurred, other cities don't stop there. They then ask, how do we connect the open spaces with trails? Soon we had a trails committee and put all kinds of trails in. One supposedly to go all around Princeton. Yes, except there's a Stony Brook. So you have open space there, and the trail is here and there. How do you get across? Wendy, do you remember we walked on both sides of the Stony Brook, waved at each other because we couldn't get together, did a little video, and then sooner or later we had a bridge. Miss Stockton, the present engineer of Princeton, is she here? Miss Stockton? Hey, there she is. She worked on getting the bridge done. Thank you. And thank you, our original engineer. So you meet other people, and it's amazing how almost everybody in Princeton feels, I should contribute. I should be part of it. I should join this or that group and then do something. So now I'm 90, and I'm slowly going over the edge. I have chronic fatigue. I have headaches and mental nebula, and my legs are not good. So I don't know how many more times we'll do it. But what I always say is, thank you for allowing me to be a citizen of Princeton, and please carry, hey, there's a former mayor I know very well, and the husband. So I look around and I find good old friends here, and I thank you for allowing me to have lived in Princeton with you and build this town as it is now and will grow. Thank you.
Mayor, before you open up, there is one thing we did not talk about, and I just want to make sure everyone knows in terms of some of the actions that we're taking now. As you'll see on the agenda, there is an ordinance to make a change in one of the zones along Witherspoon Street. It was initially designated 3-hour parking with the needs to provide additional long-term parking. We have an ordinance that would amend the ordinance that would create that location into all-day parking to serve the needs of a number of groups, including the employees, the Arts Council, and a number of places that need extended parking hours.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to open up the public comment. We're going to start with the sheet that was on the podium at the beginning of the meeting, and then I'll open it up to anybody else. Can I just get a show of hands for people who are interested in making a statement or comment? Okay, great. So we'll start with Arthur Schwartz.
I feel like I'm appearing before the Supreme Court.
We've tried to lower this down, but it's...
This is going to be shorter than I thought because you, Madam Mayor, and the Council have already addressed some of the points I was going to raise. Thank you. I was going to start by saying that we recognize that we need to raise more revenue, and this is one mechanism. And the actions you've addressed add a spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. And, but we know that minor irritants add up. And I'm glad that you're addressing the 35-cent fee. I was the one who raised the darkness issue. I have weak eyes, despite my annual ophthalmological examination. And Princeton can be a very dark town in certain areas. And it's very hard unless, I didn't know I needed a flashlight to be able to work that machine. But there are some things that still rankle. Apps can work two ways. I don't know if this app can. So if you can add money, why can't you subtract money? Suppose I think I'm going to be at a meter for 2 hours, but I'm only there for 1.5. Why can't I pull that half? On another point, and I think for many people this is an issue, let us address the money that sits on those smart cards, which have turned out to be dumb cards. How do we get our money back? It rankles that we have to pay a 10% fee for having been good citizens. That shouldn't have to happen. I don't know what the rules are in the town. The simplest situation would be whatever money I have on my smart card, that goes toward my property tax. Done. Dollar for dollar, penny for penny. Why can't that happen? Having the garage for a period of time, yes, that's a partial solution, but only if the places you park in town allow that garage to be convenient. For many of us, that's not where we park. It makes no sense. I can go to free parking and be as close a hike as I am to the garage for where I go and other people go. And again, let me thank you for addressing what you have already addressed, and I hope you will look kindly on some of the things I have mentioned.
Great, thank you. And I do want to address both the suggestions you had. So if you pay with the app, you can end your session. And so if you end your session, you'll get the money back. And so that is happening right now, and I think you'll see an improvement to that. Because as Ms. Stockton was explaining, when there was a minimum, people were confused. When the minimum was so high, people were confused because you had to put in at least $1. Now it's lowered to 50 cents, so it should capture most of those. So if you pay with the app, you come back to your spot, you end your session, it'll refund the money, and you'll just be paying for the time that you parked.
And there is a button on the app or a space to push that says stop.
Right.
Now.
What if you're not using the app and you're just using the meter?
If you're using the meter, it's the same as if you paid with coins before. So there's no sort of way to get your money back out of it unless you use the app. With the smart cards, that is on the list of things that we're going to be addressing this year. Right now, we have it set up so that you can still use the smart cards in the garage through the end of April. And I imagine we're going to be tackling the smart card issue in the coming months to figure out how to have some sort of refund of people's money or transfer it onto the app or some sort of system so people can still have access to that money. And we understand that that's a priority. I will say that it's often you have fond memories for things that drove you up the wall when you had them. So I can tell you that there were lots of angry people in the clerk's office screaming and yelling about their smart cards. This was before we said we were going to get rid of the smart cards, just like years ago, that there were a lot of problems with the smart cards. So I think we all understand and have been enlightened about the love people have for the smart cards and the need to have some programs that offer incentives for residents, and I think we totally understand that. The smart cards themselves, I think, are being overly romanticized in terms of a technology that worked because there were a lot of problems with it. But we understand the idea of it is a great one, and I think we're going to try to figure out how to capture some of that in the new system. Okay, next is Jane Manners. Oh,
she also had comments about a different ordinance, not about the parking. So
okay.
I think she's going to be back.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, this is for land use. So I'm going to skip over the people who are here for the land use one and go to Lauren Gelman. Sorry, Lauren Gelman.
hold it.
You can hold it too, that's easier.
I'm short. I'm Lauren Ary of Gelman. I'm the owner of Milk and Cookies on Chamber Street. Thank you guys for addressing this issue. Obviously, there's a lot of confusion and things, so I just wanted to pass on some observations that I've picked up. A lot of customers have come in and complained about the new system, largely because of the huge increase in price. So I wanted to pass that along. Also, in the decrease in long-term parking, convenient long-term parking, that's been difficult for a lot of people. And also the extension of the time. I guess they end later now, and that's been difficult for people. Also, in terms of hiring people, I've lost several employees, and I know other people have too, because the price of the parking has gone up so much and it's become so much less convenient. So I wanted to pass on these observations.
Next is Margaret Griffin.
Mayor, can I just mention that we are looking at employee permits in this next, in the first half of 2019, because we have heard that concern and we're trying to find some ways to help business out.
In addition, if I can, Mayor, you also see the ordinance on the agenda that would provide additional longer-term parking along Witherspoon.
Hi, Margaret Griffin, 50 Patton Avenue. I'm one of the people who prefer the new parking meters and the ability to use a credit card when quarters are not available in my purse. I was never a fan of the smart cards, found them difficult to refill, and as a consequence, never had one on hand. Unfortunately, I have received many, many, many parking tickets over the years. I think I can feel that it's already going to be better for me. I also am struck by the fact that this is a more friendly system for out-of-towners who are coming in to shop or spend the day. Surely they don't have a smart card. I think businesses should be happy that we're encouraging customers. It's a definite plus, I think. I agree that parking meters are hard to read in the dark, but I don't believe the old meters are that much better. But I'm so happy that you're addressing this problem. Thank you very much. As for the change in rates and implementation of zones, it sounds like you have been grappling with this universal parking issue sincerely and openly to come up with the right balance. This is a supply and demand problem of a finite resource, downtown parking. Parking is not free. And when it is underpriced, it creates a tragedy of the commons, common use of our space. Donald Shoup's book, The High Cost of Free Parking, which seems to be a bestseller in this town at the moment, is a gripping read, but very much worth studying. He clearly explains the problems and strategies for dealing with this phenomenon. Call me an elitist, but I think it's wise to listen to experts like Shoup, who have studied the problem and have real data to back it up. But meters and rates aside, I really think the bigger problem here in Princeton sometimes is the constant griping that comes along with any changes in town. There is the mythical idea of the good old Princeton and the notion that nothing must or should change. I remember the bitter fight over the building of the Spring Street Garage and the construction of the Heinz Plaza. The can't change anything about Princeton crowd opposed it and griped and complained bitterly about the loss of a handful of parking spots from that open lot that is now the plaza. They tried to frighten seniors and others about the scary nature of parking garages. My point is that the parking fight is an old one. When I was co-owner of Macabre Books, merchants and others were griping even then about the parking. They complained bitterly about the last rate hike 10 years ago. And lo and behold, it couldn't have been too expensive because the spots were always filled at peak times and locations. It was probably too low. Shoup recommends finding the sweet spot for the ideal of an 85% vacancy rate for street parking. This encourages turnover of spots and makes the downtown more friendly for zipping in and out to pick up this or that. Those who intend to spend hours for dinner and a movie simply need to find spots in longer zones or use off-street parking. I don't understand why this is such a difficult concept. As I remember from my merchant days, nothing was worse than having a car parked right in front of the store for hours on end because the parker was feeding the meter. It prevented our customers from running in for the book they had ordered. As an owner, I certainly discouraged our employees from parking close for the very same reason. My hope for Princeton going forward is that we can embrace the future and try to find solutions in an honest way without vitriol. I believe downtown retail is suffering in some ways for a variety of reasons, most of all due to the rise of Amazon. This is happening everywhere, even in malls and shopping centers. So to blame the parking meters on these problems is kind of ludicrous. It seems like a scapegoat. So please, I encourage solutions, and I appreciate the hard work you do. It's not easy to look to the future, but I hope we will have vision going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Dorothea, final.
Hi there. I'm Dorothea, one of the owners of Labyrinth Books. And where to begin? We met, Mayor Lempert and Tim Quinn and Leticia Fraga met with a group of downtown merchants recently, and I think I'm speaking on their behalf. We followed up with in correspondence, and we hope to continue that dialogue. I want to say that in listening, I think that the fixes to the meters address some of the problems, but they don't get at the heart of the matter. When we sat with you, Mayor Lempert, you said to us, and we were glad to hear you say, that economic development is really the heart of the matter and what motivates this overhaul in parking. I think that we should take the many empty spaces downtown as a signal that we cannot take a vital downtown for granted. And parking, certainly I'm the first one to agree that Amazon is the behemoth here. Nobody is blaming the merchants, all our troubles on the parking system. That said, a real improvement to the parking system, and we are not against change. We are willing and hoping to work with you for change on this. But a real improvement to the parking system has to really take the concerns of the merchants into account. And what we are trying to work on, and we hope to include the group that will think about this as a group of merchants, goes along three lines. And the first one is, yes, progressive parking. So a system where you would start at a lower rate, the second hour would be at a slightly higher rate. We believe it has to have a third hour. Otherwise, we're making visitors to Princeton choose between a meal and shopping, rather than allowing them to go and have a meal and then go to Jazam's to buy a toy. So there needs to be a third hour on this. And we think that the rates actually have to come down below what's been thrown out tonight, which might be a good starting point for a conversation of 175 and 225. We think it needs to go lower, but we also recognize that you all have a budget that you've worked on for this. You've gone to great expense on the system, and that somehow, if we're going to lower the downtown rates, somehow there have to be solutions to be budget neutral in a real overhaul. I'm going to try to hurry up. We have ideas for where some of that money can come back from. I think we have creative ideas. We hope to keep talking to you about those. The other crucial thing, and Lauren mentioned it, is permitted employee parking and walking distance. It is absolutely essential for us to be able to do what we do for our employees, not to have to pay much in parking. It's just absolutely essential. We're really glad that it's high on your agenda. What I want to say is, let's not now come up with quick fixes. I'm sure you all want to move on to other things, but I really urge you to give this now, in this phase of revisions, enough time so that we can take one more comprehensive look and say, can we get a third hour? Can we get the rates downtown down enough so it really feels different. Yes, of course, they have to be higher than they have been. We all understand and support that. But where is that good spot, and how can that be financed? We all want to think with you about that, and we urge you to wrap permitted employee parking and walking distance into this phase. It all hangs together. This is why it's so complex. So let's not pick and choose one thing and then move other problems down the line. My time is up. I think I speak for some. We would love to circulate the proposal that we have sent out as a draft to a larger group of merchants, and we will be quick about that. That way you can feel that this has a broad support from the merchants. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to address a couple things. So one is, yes, the permitted employee parking is high on the list, and this was never intended to be a 2018 project, like, done. It's a multi-year project, and we also have built into it review of the rates every 6 months for the first year and then annually after that. So we had already built in a review in April. And one of the advantages I don't think has been mentioned about the new meters is that it does give us data to look at that the old system didn't give in as convenient a format. So we'll be able to have data on usage and other things like that, so we can be making data-based, evidence-based decisions, which is always a good thing to be making. We have some original data from the Nelson Nygaard report where you can look at some of the usage there. That's what this was based on, but the system allows for tinkering. I caution about the 3 hours, and that was something that's been discussed back and forth. I don't think there's necessarily unanimity among the merchants on the 3 hours, and we made it 2 hours in response to feedback from a majority of merchants that we spoke to. And there's actually the 2 hours and there's 3 hour zones for both. So I don't think there's, I think you could go both ways, but, and maybe having it progressive addresses both. But I think that it wasn't that we heard people wanted 3 hours and we said, no, it has to be 2 hours. I think we were hearing a lot of pushback that it needed to be 2 in the center.
And I just want to share a little data that I heard today at our Public Works meeting, which is that the average parking stay at a 2 hour meter is about 1 hour and 35 minutes, and the average parking stay at a 3 hour meter is about 1 hour and 38 minutes. So it sort of is preliminary information, at least, that suggests that having the longer meter times isn't going to particularly make a difference.
Right, and that's exactly the kind of data I think we can look at. But I think we're going to collect data, and I think that might be something that we look at again in a couple months when we know more how the current system is acting and how those 2 different zones are acting. But we do want to engage with you. I don't think we can set up a process tonight, but I think it's something that we should think about if we want to do some more of these meetings. I find this structure really hard to have a conversation because I feel like we're up here in the sky and I'd much rather be around a table with a smaller group of people hammering some stuff out. So we can see if there's a way to set up some sort of working committee or to set up some more informal meetings with different interest groups, because I think for a lot of these issues, especially when it comes to the employee permit parking and other things, it's just going to help to have some working sessions that are less formal than this. But thank you for your input and for your engagement. Josh Cinder?
Hello, Josh Wazinder. I live at 142 Moore Street, and my office is at 20 Nassau Street. And although I wish I didn't have to drive as often as I do, I tend to drive almost daily as my business requires it. So I'm not going to get into all of the items that I'm sure you're going to hear tonight, but I recognize that the goal of the new meters was to increase the vibrancy of downtown Princeton. I'm appreciative of your recognition that the system and its costs have not done that yet. I'm glad to hear you'll be addressing the employee parking sooner than later, because I think that is critical for the downtown. One item that I haven't heard a lot of people discussing, but I think it's important, is that larger information about the website needs to be displayed on the meters or in signage in town. On a daily basis, I'm walking down Nassau Street or one of the other streets, and I see people who are new to the town scratching their heads figuring out what the heck to do. And I point out to them that there's a website, and they said, how do we even know that? And the text is, I think, maybe 6, maybe 8 point. It's this very small text. And I understand that QR codes are, I think the consultant said it's outdated technology. However, when you see a QR code as a graphic, it's sort of understood that there's something more to be seen there. And if you click on that QR code, it'll bring you to the website. I think on a simple basis, stickers can be put on the meters, and it can help everybody in that communication. I'd also like to point out that previously there was long-term parking on Paul Robeson Place between Witherspoon and Chambers. And currently, these meters are almost entirely 3-hour parking now. And I can't say I've seen every single day since you put the meters in, but certainly for the last week, week and a half, those meters between Paul Robeson and Chambers are empty. And it just seems like, if they were the 8 to 10 hour meters that they were before, you'd have some people parking there, you'd have some revenue coming in on those meters. It's a spot of town that people necessarily don't park to run into a store. And I think even if you made them 4 or 5 hour meters, people would take advantage of them. Right now it's 3-hour meters in that location. They're not taking advantage of it. And there are many other things I can talk about, but I'll leave it for other people. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Josh was the last person who signed up ahead of time, so I wanted to open it up for anybody who'd like to speak on parking who didn't already sign up. And I'd ask that you state your name, and then if you can remember when you're done speaking to go sign the sheet that's on the table.
Hi, I'm Joel Schwartz. I live on Armour Road. I don't have specific comments or recommendations. I have some questions, which I'd be glad to provide to you in writing afterwards. One is about smart cards. It's not clear to me exactly the reason why smart cards were discontinued. It's clear that parking is complicated, and everybody has different druthers, and it's very hard to please everybody. And you guys, have engaged a very complicated issue. But the reason I ask about smart cards is that over the last week or so, I've looked at how parking is addressed in comparable towns to Princeton: Westfield, Summit, Cranford, Morristown. Almost all of towns have brand new parking meters, and they all accept smart cards. They have lots of different ways of being paid. So I'd encourage you to, maybe there's a reason that I'm not aware of, but since those other towns have comparable meters and have smart cards, it might be helpful to explain why it is that we can't have them in Princeton. In addition, in explaining that, I would encourage you to look into the possibility of having 2-tier smart cards. Smart cards for residents, smart cards for non-residents. Same way we have a pricing structure like that at Community Park Pool. There's so many different issues in parking, but it might make residents feel better about increased parking fees if they knew that they were getting some kind of preferential treatment. There are a number of provisions that people have commented on social media in the last few weeks that I looked into how other towns handle. Westfield, for example, provides you 10 minutes free. So the issue that we've seen all over social media, it now costs me another 50 or 75 cents to get a cup of coffee. In Westfield, you get 10 or 15 minutes for free. And that information on many of the things I've been describing to you are provided on the websites and the parking websites of those towns in very clear ways. I'd like to second what Josh said. So much of the frustration that's going on comes from communication, and we all know that the rollout of anything new is complicated. It would be really great, and in fact I urge you to look at as many of the websites, comparable towns, to see how people handle those issues. It's true that there's almost nothing new under the sun, and so many towns have gone through the same pain as Princeton, introducing new meters, introducing new rates, and have found solutions to many of the things that people have been complaining about. Another issue is the app fees. That's been a hot spot for many people. It would be helpful to present, no one knows what the dollars are. Everyone's focused on the actual fee amount. It would be helpful to know how much money it has cost per month, because that's an amount of money that someone pays. Right now, the users are paying it. Possibly the town of Princeton should absorb that in the way the prices are structured, since that has been a lightning rod for many people's concerns. Another issue is parking on Sundays. Westfield, for example, you park free on Sundays. Many towns have Sunday parking frees. I know you're working on employee permit parking. It probably would, and I know that the issue in setting meter rates, in addition to the issue of 85% occupancy and having 2 free spaces on every block so people can park, relates to what's being charged in parking garages and what's being charged for employees. Now, I know you guys chose to roll out this piece first. In hindsight, everyone's a genius, so it might have made sense to work on the employee parking piece at the same time, since the idea is to wean employees off of parking where we want customers to park, and put that piece together. Again, many of the towns I've mentioned and many others in New Jersey have, it's an ongoing issue everywhere. It's not like we're the only ones who have problems. Every town has that problem, but they find places for employees to park further away. Next is prices. In many of the towns I've mentioned, the parking fees are about 50 cents an hour. In Morristown, they're about $1 an hour. In Westfield and Cranford, about 50 cents an hour, and Summit, somewhere in between. So the question is, and many people are wondering, on what basis were the parking fees set the way they are? The only evidence I've seen as to why they were set this way is to recoup the cost. I read the Finance Committee's report, and it seemed as though that some of this was backed into on the basis of the payback for the investment of the new parking meters. I would suggest that that is, for 2 reasons, not necessarily the most logical way to set pricing. One is that, as Ms. Griffin pointed out, parking is a social good, and how much we spend on our meters and how we get paid back for that is not necessarily the right calculus for determining those fees. When you look at actual parking rates in many of our comparable sister towns throughout central New Jersey, the rates are so much lower that it does make one wonder, what is the logic towards doing this? Which brings me to one last suggestion. I followed the Nelson Nygaard reports. I've read them all, and anyone who's read them can understand a great deal about the analysis that led to what was ultimately implemented. However, after the Nelson Nygaard process, the next phase of the process, there's no paper trail that I'm aware of. If I've missed it, I apologize. But I can't pick up a report and understand the process that you all went through with Julie Dixon to evaluate the pros and cons of pricing, about why there's 2-hour meters here and 3-hour meters there and various other things. One of the frustrations for people is not understanding the goals that you were trying to achieve. With no doubt that you thought long and hard about what you were trying to do, but I, for one, don't understand the goals, so therefore I can't look at it. I could read the Nelson Nygaard reports and understand, oh yes, we started this process thinking we needed another parking garage. Turns out that we don't, because we needed to rethink our parking system. You guys are engaged in that process, but it's not clear how, following Nelson Nygaard, we got to the implementation of what we're implementing now. I'd just like to close by saying that I offer what I just said, not just as a person who's lived in Princeton for 40 years, but my work for the last 40 years has been as an architect, planner, and developer in downtowns throughout central New Jersey. I've been involved for 10 years in a special improvement district in downtown Union County, and so I'm very familiar with what many, many towns do to engage this process. And I'd say the biggest common denominator is towns using parking to promote the goals that the towns have for their downtowns, which is something that I think can't be externalized enough. So as you go forward and present the data that Mr. DeShields presented tonight, I urge you to present as much of that information as you can online on an ongoing basis to help people understand the whys and wherefores.
Thank you. I
Thanks.
think that's a good suggestion. It is all online, but it's not necessarily all in one place that's convenient, so we can work on that and putting it all in one spot. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment?
Excuse me. My name is Jack Morrison, president of the Princeton Merchants Association. And I brought with me, survey data for each of you. When this came about, we posted and there was a lot of, as Princeton, Liz will assure you, as president of the Merchants Association, we get texts at any time, any place, anywhere. We posted a survey in mid-December, and we received 57 responses and another 10 or 15 verbal responses or conversations. So out of those 57, it represents 1,100 employees. I would estimate, again, it's an estimate, but probably $25 million in payroll that goes into our community. The survey respondents represent the uniqueness and essence of why Princeton is special. So I think it's important that we listen to them. I'll run real quick through this. Customers and employees feel that parking in Princeton is easier, adequate, or more difficult. 88% of the respondents felt it was more difficult. Do you think the parking rate increases are reasonable? Agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. 93% of the respondents strongly disagreed. Excuse me. Has customer traffic to your business changed since the new parking system was installed? Now, this is through the holiday. 71% of the respondents saw their traffic go down. If customer traffic has changed, by how much? 58% of those respondents, it was 1 to 10%. 40% was greater than 10%. 50% of the respondents have downloaded the app, and the app got 90% of the respondents that had downloaded the app rated the thing 3-star, 2-star fair. 90% it was on the fair side. I've also attached, so I cut and paste, so I didn't attach names to these comments of the different stores, shopkeepers, etc. I listed on the back all the different shops that you see, again, to the uniqueness of this town. But the testimonials from customers of not returning to town because of the cost and scarcity of parking. That's tough for us. We have actual testimonies of customers saying, I'm not coming back, I don't shop there. We have testimonials of people that own stores in other towns and say, hey, why don't I see you back at my shop in Princeton? We don't go to Princeton anymore. And now that it's too expensive and I can't find a space, I'm not coming back. I know that's not what you wanted, and we want to correct that, but that's what we have so far. It's also impacting seniors. Making parking expensive and difficult to find is impacting customer traffic in the senior section. Testimonials of businesses struggling and questioning whether or not you really support them. I urge you to read these comments. I think they're important, and I hope that these conversations that we're going to have will come up with a better system. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Hello, good evening. Sam Bunting, 99 Dempsey Avenue. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me tonight, and Happy New Year to you all. I wanted to talk about the parking thing. In general, I would like to applaud your efforts to work through and find a solution to this very difficult question of parking. A question which is very, very hard to make people happy, because fundamentally there are only so many top-notch parking spots in downtown Princeton, and how are you going to allocate them? Everybody wants them, so who's going to get them? I think you guys have done a really good data-centric approach to try to figure out what the best possible zones are. I think the new meters are good. I know a lot of people are very unhappy about the smart card going away and the 10-minute grace period, but the way I see it is that the ability to pay with a credit card is a big convenience. I think the app is fantastic. It allows you to top up from remotely. So really, the new system is much more modern and effective than what we used to have. I don't agree with setting very cheap parking rates for street parking. I think it's a bad idea for many reasons. First of all, when street parking is cheaper than garage parking, you incentivize people to drive round and round Princeton, creating traffic, pollution, endangering pedestrians and cyclists, all in the hunt for that perfect parking space right outside the store where they want to go. Most times it's not there. So you're creating stress in visitors who are coming to Princeton by making them drive around and around and hunt for that perfect parking spot. We should be directing people to garages. And when we look at the consultant's report, which you commissioned, what we find is that there's a lot of space in our garages which is not being used. The Chambers Street garage is sitting half empty most of the time. I don't understand why shoppers and employees can't be parking in those garages. And I think what would be really fantastic would be if maybe some of the merchants could find a way to offer validation so that for our people, for our customers who want to come and support our local businesses, they can get their parking ticket validated and go and park in a garage instead of constantly hunting for these elusive street parking spots. The parking in Princeton is always going to be limited, and whenever you dedicate streets for parking, you take away other possible uses for it. And I'm not 100% happy about that. I think that Princeton could be a lot nicer if instead of having so much of our downtown dedicated for parking cars, that we had wider sidewalks, more outdoor dining options, and the ability to walk around the street unencumbered by traffic, the ability to ride a bicycle into town without risking our lives. All of these things are challenged by street parking, but I can see that what you've been trying to do is to make it easier for people to find parking at different rates and with different time limits. I think you've done a pretty good job with that, so I think you deserve some credit. And I also give you credit for having this constructive dialogue with the merchants to try to find some tweaks to the system to try to make everybody happy. But fundamentally, I think you've done a good job and you should be pleased with yourselves.
Hi, I'm Scott Sellers from 50 Patton Avenue, and as you all know, I'm the chair of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, which has for 10 years now been urging Princeton to make sure that its parking revenues match some sort of cost increase that's consistent with what is going on with our property taxes, and that hasn't happened in 10 years. And it was because it is such a complicated issue that we could never get together to come up with a solution, and we finally realized that we had to take the broadest brush strokes possible. And congratulations for starting out. I think it's a magnificent start, and I thank you for that. We need to, as we acknowledged when we started the process, make sure that we are watching what happens and measure and evaluate as we go along. And I think that's where we are, and I don't think we should jump the gun on anything. We are exactly where we expected to be. The people that are commenting are exactly the people you expect to comment in the negative. The people in the positive are exactly the people you expect to comment in the positive. So I don't think that there's any real crisis here. I would point out that on a lot of the other towns that have been cited here, most of those towns have what are they called, central business improvement districts in place. So they've already got the merchants that are there voluntarily investing in their downtown for the betterment of it. We do not have that here for some reason. Finally, I would like to say that, we consciously made the decision that we did not want to promote employee parking in the central business district or the perimeter, because those are the spots where where the customers are supposed to be parking. They're the ones that can afford to walk 5 minutes to work if they want to have less expensive parking, or there's even free parking within 5 minutes. Shoup's analysis says that 85%, that if you have 85% occupancy, that's where you want to be. My anecdotal version of what's going on right now versus the 57 surveys that you got was on Saturday, there wasn't a parking place to be had in the central business district, so we're still underpricing from that point of view. Had there been a lower price, there still wouldn't have been a parking place. So the result of that survey would say it's still a poor shopping experience in town. Once again, thank you very much for the effort you put in. I look forward to making it better as we go along.
Thanks, Scott. If you'd like to speak, I would just say, please come on up to the mic and state your name. And I've been forgetting to remind people to sign the sheet on the table. If you're able to do that, that would help us make sure we get your name right in the minutes.
Good evening. My name is Dean Smith, and I'm co-owner of Jazam's Toy Store on Palmer Square. First, I just want to acknowledge Mayor Lempert and Councilman Quinn and Councilwoman Fraga for meeting with us earlier in the week to talk about some of these issues. That is totally appreciated, and I hope those conversations can continue. I just want to address a few things that have been stated tonight. The first one is about rates. And about an adequate rate. And I think I've expressed this in meetings and in letters to the mayor. If you track our rate with the rate of inflation over the last 11 years and at a slightly above 2%, come out to around $1.55. That's where our rate would be if we were tracking with inflation. If we tracked with a really aggressive inflation rate of a little over 3%, we'd be around that $1.75. But we're at $2.25. So I don't know if we're at the right rate based on what folks are saying in terms of property taxes and other things in our area. So that's the first thing I want to address. The second is the data points that we're going to be looking at. One of the most important aspects of the Nelson Nygaard survey was addressing employee parking, right? That was one of your primary pressure points for a lack of downtown parking. But we haven't addressed that yet, right? So we're talking about, Mr. DeShields is talking about data points and looking at data points. So until you look at data points where employee parking is addressed, you're never going to get adequate data points for parking pressure downtown. So I really think that the whole process was backwards. If we dealt with employee parking first, then we'd be able to get adequate data points to address parking downtown and address some of these issues that folks are talking about in terms of the 85%. And I understand these percentages and so forth and why we would want to achieve those. But how you achieve those, this isn't the only answer. There were many, many options on the table throughout this process. And last thing I want to address is this notion of change and about the people that you'd assume would be talking one way or another about these issues. I think that me and a bunch of other folks from the merchant community throughout this process have been fully open, communicative, open to change and radical change throughout the town and in the process. And so to say that we're not interested in change is just, I just find it insulting. And it's the way that it goes down in all of these forums. And so I think we've been at the table. I think that we've argued for positive, proactive change and really intelligent change with regards to the parking situation. And I have to say that 3 hours is important. And what I'll say, and I just want to say it very quickly, if we're looking at a 2-hour and a 3-hour, and you're not seeing much difference between the amount of stay between those two types of spaces, I'd say that that's just as much of an argument for 3 hours throughout as it is against 3 hours throughout. So I think that that's an important walk away from that particular part of the conversation. And just one last thing. And it's about this whole idea of of people wanting a space right in front of where they want to be. Our whole world, there's all these little vans going around our town right now with EAN holdings on them, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they're filled up with boxes from Amazon. That's what they do. And they're everywhere at all hours of the day and night. So people wanting to park in front of where they want to shop, that's a convenience. And so are all those little vans. And so people are choosing that because they're finding this process of going downtown a little bit difficult. So I'm trying to find a middle ground for them, right? I'm trying to find a way for people to come from far away that want to spend more than 2 hours. The parking garage is full and they found a spot on the street, but they can't do it because if they want to, they have to drive to another zone if they can figure out what another zone is. So we're just looking for a middle ground. That's all. Just a middle ground. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. I'm Nancy Shriver. I live just down the street. I shopped in Princeton for a long time. I can't shop in Princeton. I can't go to dinner. I can't go to lunch. I can't, if I have to park to do that, I'm not going to park in the parking garage. I'm just not a fan of parking garages. I don't like backing out when there might be children behind me or people coming around a corner. The speed of play in a parking garage is just a little too fast for me. I'm a very conscientious driver, but I just don't want to be scared by it. So it's going to be on the street. I'm going to park. If I want to have dinner, if I want to have lunch someplace, if I want to go to Jack's place, no matter where I want to go with colleagues, we can't do it anymore in town. I don't shop as much in town. I think since all of this started, I've probably been using those meters, which have given me plenty of problems, 5 or 6 times. That's outrageous. I love to go downtown. I love to walk downtown, but I can't do that unless I drive part of the way and then walk around when I'm down there. It just, I understand what you're talking about. I understand the benefits of what you're talking about. You're just not including me in that process. I can't walk that far. And I have a 95-year-old mother who I take for things, walks. She likes to look in the shop windows and stuff. It doesn't include us because we can't do that 2-hour limit. We need to do more than the 2 hours, and lots of times we won't use it all up, but most of the time we will. So I would plead for you to think more about the 2 to 3 that they were just suggesting, because for some people that's what works for them when other things don't. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say we still want you to go downtown, so I'd encourage you to look at the map, and there are a lot of 3-hour zones that are close in. So on Nassau Street, just on the other side of the Garden Theater, is 3 hours all the way down. Well, that's 3-hour parking is down there, right? Right, but I would take another look at the map because we tried to design it. So Van Devender is all 3 hours. Nassau Street down there is all 3 hours. So there are, if you want to park for 3 hours and don't want to use the garage, there are spots, but I've put that on my list, looking at converting more of the 2 hours or all of the 2-hour zone to 3 hour. And I think that's something we can put on our list for this year. Yep. Yep. Right. No, I hear what you're saying. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Nancy, I actually had a question or 2 questions because I didn't completely understand your comment.
But I would just ask you to come back up to the mic so that it can get recorded. Thank you.
I do get that you like the idea of the 3-hour meters, but I wasn't sure if you were also saying that the parking was too expensive and that you have trouble finding a spot. either of those things that you've been having trouble with, or is it only the 3-hour meters?
Using the meters, trying to put my charge card in there and get it to work. It's just not really clear how it all works. But that aside, I'm just saying I used to be able to like park by CVS or whatever, go in there at the drugstore, get something, then go get 3 or 4 things up the street and still meet my friends. I can do one of those things now. I've even stopped on coming into town from the south, coming north, and ran across the street to go to Ralph Lauren, and then, well, I couldn't get more than that amount of time at that particular spot, so I couldn't go further, because if I went further, it would take longer than that 2 hours.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I'm not quite sure about is that none of that has changed. Is that correct? So it was 2 hours in 2018, and it's 2 hours now.
Well, it's the stupid thing about the credit card and the putting change in the meter, too. It takes like 17 quarters in order to get that 2 hours, or you have to use your credit card. I've had trouble using my credit card. So it's a combination of factors. Some of them are age-related. Some of them are just techno-related, whatever. It's just not clear. It hasn't been easy to use. I don't even look forward to going uptown now, which is pathetic. Thank you.
Kathleen Gittleman, I'm the owner of Pins and Needles on Chambers Street. Just a couple of things. The remarks about the Chambers Street garage, it's 50 yards from my store. People don't use it because it's too expensive. That's been the theme forever. There is a question of what the market will bear. And most of the people that come in my store just say that the garage is just too expensive. The other thing is because it does not have an elevator, and my business definitely skews older than a lot of businesses, but there's a large portion of my clientele that's not going to walk all the way to the top of the 3rd floor because there's a parking space up there. The other thing, I think, it makes sense on a lot of levels. The focus of town is the people that live in town. My business probably skews 80% outside of the town, so the donut around the hole. For as difficult as people that live here are finding it to work through the system, everybody will eventually figure it out. Everybody will eventually have the app. They'll eventually figure it out. For the other 80% of my customer base that comes from, you know what I mean, by the large perimeter area, they're blown away by the rate increase. They use other towns that are 50 cents, 75 cents, $2.25 an hour. They're blown away by it. And they're not here with enough frequency that it's going to take forever for them to get a level of comfort with it, which is just a problem. I don't think I'm the only store that a huge portion of my customer base is out of town. Princeton is a huge regional town. You talk about Westfield, everybody that shops in Westfield lives in Westfield. It's not the case in Princeton at all. People come from long distances, and it's just a lot to figure out. And the other thing that a couple people have touched on, but the pressures on brick and mortar retail, just in general, pick up the Times this morning, Fifth Avenue, almost a 30% vacancy rate. Dean says the Amazon trucks delivering, that's only one part of it. Anything in my store, anybody can sit on their sofa and order everything I have for a lesser amount. While they're sitting on their sofa, they'll have it tomorrow. That's a huge, huge, huge pressure on every brick and mortar retail store. To me, the biggest issue is the rate. It just doesn't seem like it's in the best interest of making it complicated and expensive for people to get off that sofa and not use the internet to make their purchases. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think most of the people here know, but I just wanted to clarify that the Chambers Street garage is actually owned and operated by Palmer Square, and they control the rates in that garage, but it was something that was mentioned in the Nelson Nygaard report as being one of the issues. So I think it is, that's one of the complicated situations, is that we have private parking and public parking, and it's hard to coordinate all of the pricing for that, so that we're creating a single incentive. But I think it does need to probably be part of the conversation this year. And to the degree that the merchants want to help us engage with that conversation would be great. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Hi, Tina Castillo, 79 Dempsey Avenue. I want to thank all of you for all the hard work and the courage, really, to go ahead with this, the new parking meters and the increased rates. When it was at 125, everybody was complaining that there was no place to park on the street. And I'm with the people who adhere to Mr. Shoup. I think we should collect the data and see, I mean, if at 225 it's still full, that tells you something. By the way, I don't like Amazon. I'm a card-carrying member of the fan club of our merchants. Literally, I have my Small World card and my Labyrinth card, you know. And I do believe that we should move as fast as possible on wayfinding so that people who come to town don't know the way can find those parking garages and don't circle around our town, you know, leaving emissions and pollution and congestion. And I also strongly believe that we need to help employees in town, and we should start talking about parking on the perimeter. And with that, I would urge you to consider increasing the frequency of the freebie. If that means that it cannot, you know, be the freebie, then I would love to take the freebie. It's just so hard to take because it only comes once per hour. And if it came 3 times per hour, 4 times per hour, I would pay a few bucks for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Michelle Perone-Lambros, East Stewart Road. I'll be very brief because we've covered most everything I was going to mention. Thank you, Council. I know how hard you've all worked, and the merchants too, to try and come together on this. A couple of pointers, I would say, just definitely look at reducing the rates in the, in the first hour and 2. So maybe the 150 or 175, then 2, and incrementally increase it like you've been talking about. I think that would really help to alleviate some of the problem. And the second thing is, and we've talked about this too, is to incentivize people to move to the app, is to give a discount. So if they put $20 on the wallet, to give $5 back, to give some kind of incentive so people will start to use the app. We used to do that with the smart card. We used to have a little incentive bonus, and that would also maybe incentivize them and kind of offset the surcharge issue. And if we can push back and either get the surcharge removed or find a new mobile app, then so be it. So I think everything is moving in the right direction in terms of addressing these things. And the last thing I would say is if you want to put together a task force of any sort and have people involved willing to serve and help in any way we can, because I know that the intention is good all around, and that we all need to really think and help in economic development terms and help these small businesses. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public comment of this work session? Last call. Okay, so I'm going to close the public portion of this and bring it back to council. And I just want to summarize some of the items that I've put on my list for follow-up. So I'll start with the ones that I think we want to try to resolve tonight or get some direction on tonight. So the first is, obviously we have the Witherspoon Street ordinance introduction, which we haven't talked a whole lot about during the work session, but essentially, I think this was mentioned earlier, to add some more of the all-day parking on Witherspoon Street below the Arts Council. So that would go from, I think it's 3 hour now, and it would go to the all day 75 cents an hour parking. The other is, I just wanted to get a sense from council if there was support, and we'd have to bring this up for action on the 28th, but is there interest in creating in the 2-hour zone, a less expensive first hour? So I'm proposing like $1.75 for the first hour and then keep the second hour at $2.25, which is essentially, I think, about 15 minutes free.
Yes.
Is there interest in putting that on, or are there questions?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think the concern about that was that people will then feed the meter at the lower rate. So I have no objection to going ahead with it, but I'd like to then check back and see if that's what's happening. Would we be able to get data on that, or wouldn't be able to tell if it was the same user? But you'd see a decrease in longer term parking and an increase in 1 hour parking. So maybe we can just keep that in mind.
I don't think that's that much of a risk, because if you put money in before the time is run out, would that start a new session? It would. No, so really people would have to let their time run out completely and then come back to feed the meter, risk getting a ticket if they came a minute too late. I don't think that's a big concern, but I could be wrong.
I think we could track if there were a lot of 1 hour exactly sessions. That might be a sign.
Can I bring up a broader issue as we consider this question? Based on a few people here quoted Donald Shoup, the main issue here is we're trying to figure out that sweet spot between parking that's not too cheap and parking that doesn't deter patronage to our various retailers. And we're trying to find that 85% vacancy rate. I know that we have built into the current system now where we do this 6-month review. Do you think it would make sense? I'm just wondering, being that we have a digital system where we can collect data in real time, would it make sense to maybe look at maybe shortening that period, the review period? And of course, I know that means more work for staff, et cetera. But just listening to the, number one, I'm moved by Margaret Griffin's comments about Shoup. And I'm also listening to what the various retailers are saying about possibly losing business on something that may be too expensive, even though we're still considering the data. But I would think we may want to consider shortening the review period to see if maybe it makes sense to readjust prices instead, maybe doing it more on a quarterly basis than looking at the 6-month period.
Yeah, did you want to respond to that, Mark? Or
what I was going to say is we can report back on the only issue we have, as I said before, is we only have a short amount of data. The first 2 months data, we have we started the program in November, December. It's really an odd month because it is the holidays. So we're really talking about our first, I think, really good data will be in January. And based on that, there's not a lot of, I don't know how far you want to go out, but there's not a lot of good data that we'll have moving from January forward. But we can definitely, if you want to try to I don't know what we'll have, but we could try to report a little earlier.
Yeah, I think our plan was to do a review in April. I also want to make sure that we have a lot on our list here. Mm-hmm. So if every 2 months we're reviewing rates, then that's a lot of council time when we want to be working on employee parking and we want to be working on, whether to switch 2 hours to 3 hours. So we just want to make sure that when we put parking on the agenda, we're not spending every meeting tinkering with the same issue and not moving on. So, go ahead.
I also just think, it's from a month-to-month basis, you don't know whether the changes that you're getting are seasonal or rate related or something else. You really need to, even looking at it after 6 months, it's hard to draw any significant conclusions. To really understand how people are using the system, you have to know year over year what your change is. Now, we heard earlier that we don't really have the data from before we put in the new meters because they didn't have the capability of reporting on a meter by meter basis the data. But I think what we do have is the capability to see what our occupancy rates are currently, right? And so if we've got occupancy of 95%, you know, in May and 60% in February, is that because it's cold in February, or, you know, what does it mean? You just need more data to make really sensible decisions based on the data that we're gathering.
Okay, so I just want to, so are people interested then in bringing that lower first hour rate at the next meeting? Is that, Ms. Krumler?
It feels like a rushed decision to me. I mean, it seems like there might be other options, and I don't really understand. For instance, I think someone mentioned other towns have a 10-minute free period, which I think is similar to what you're saying. So is it? I mean,
No,
is that...
it's not.
Okay.
I mean, I think you end up, if you're parked there for a while, it has the same impact in a way. You're just spreading it over the first hour, and I think it would be easier to implement.
The night, because I thought it might. I mean, I don't know if that is complicated. It probably isn't. Or do we have the capability to do the 175 or the first hour?
Both options can be handled by the software and the hardware.
I mean, I don't know if anybody else is interested in thinking about the other possible options to give a break in some way, because I'm interested in that too. But
Okay, well, so I would recommend that we bring either one of those forward at the next meeting and sort of think about it, and maybe I'll throw it to Public Works for now to think about, and we can throw it out to the community too, what people would prefer if we're thinking about both of those options. So one option would be, you know, like first 10 minutes free versus a lower rate for the first hour.
I actually wanted to add to that. I did hear a lot of good suggestions out there that I would personally like to explore. And as far as the lowering the fees and having progressive rates, I was wondering if we could also consider, if it's for another time, extending the hours from 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, I didn't finish my list too. Yeah,
sorry.
but yeah, I wanted to go through. I think that's more of a future item, just because I think doing that is more complicated, because it would require major changes in signage, change in the map, and I think we might want to collect a little more data, because that's going to be yeah, those are
software
easier.
changes.
Yeah, but anyway, so for the future items, I had dealing with the smart cards, and
I think, because I wonder if it's even possible for the current meters that we have to accept a different, I forget what they're called, but a smart card type thing. Like, is it only credit cards that it takes, or could they be programmed to take a debit or whatever you call it card that would be more like a smart card? Because I do see they do that in other towns. And if it were a possibility, just to know it was possible.
Yeah, we can explore that. I think the smart card system was extremely difficult to manage because it is not fully supported anymore. So it's sort of like, you know, it's like, you know, there's some people who like to get their parents flip phones because they're easier. But if something goes wrong with it, it's really difficult. So I think that analogy is from Mr. Quinn, which is a good one. But it's using technology from 10 years ago when you have a rapidly changing environment. So we end up, you know, there's a lot of angry people in the hallway who couldn't load their cards on those machines. That's where I would see it the most, because it was in this building. And there's a lot of frustration in the garage. So I think we just want to be careful about how much we want to invest in something. I think the idea is good.
Can I just comment? I mean, a lot of stores, if you go to get a refund for something, they'll give you a debit card, with a certain amount prepaid on it, or like a gift card, essentially. The technology is identical to a credit card.
Well,
So these machines should be able to read them. And the question is, whether they're reloadable.
Well, what I'd like to know, because I think we were told that smart cards are completely obsolete, but since other towns are doing them, there might be a newer smart card, let's not call it the same thing, but a newer.
I think it's worth talking to Westfield, but again, let's put that on the list as something to look at.
Just to find out if it's a possibility. I'm not saying let's go do it.
Okay. Okay, so smart cards, employee parking. I think we still are doing some work on the readability and the lighting situation for some areas. Looking at the 3-hour meters, the other suggestion that came up was to look at, in particular, the use on Paul Robeson Place, and whether that makes sense to keep as 3 hours or move that to all day. Employee parking, we already talked about. Oh, and then also, is there a way to create more of an incentive for people who use the wallet? Or is there some other way to capture that advantage of the smart card?
So today at Public Works, we discussed the use of coupon codes, which you can do in the app. We talked about the situation I've heard where residents would like a different rate than visitors, and we also talked about using coupon codes when the transfer is done from smart card to the wallet. I caution against going too far down the road of the smart card. I don't know when Westfield's meters were installed, but the meters that I saw just walking the floor at the League of Municipalities didn't have smart card. And I think as technology, it's not terribly convenient. I use the flip phone analogy, but it's more like a pager. You find out who wants to call you, and then you have to go to a phone to actually make the call, as opposed to, it's the same thing. You get the card, and you have to go to another location to fill the card, whereas paying by credit card or an app is a one-step process. So again, I don't know whether Westfield's meters are 5 years old and came at the end of the smart card, but it's worth asking the question. But it's also worth investigating the use of coupon codes to incentivize app use.
Great. And then, were there any other suggestions or items people heard that weren't on those lists? Yeah.
So this is sort of unfinished business from last year. We had a discussion about piloting permit parking at Franklin Lot, which I know the last year's council did not reach unanimity on, but I think that there was consensus. I know there's concern about giving someone something and then taking it away 2 years later when affordable housing, I use 2 years just as I don't know what the timetable for development of affordable housing is going to be on Franklin, but giving someone something for a period of years and then taking it back, I would argue that if we did move ahead with Franklin as it would be a pilot to see whether employees actually did park there when they were given a less expensive option, and it would be a way for us to try out the permitting system.
Great. Are there any other sort of categories of items that we didn't capture yet?
This wasn't brought up, but I can't remember where I read this suggestion. There is a suggestion that I encountered that recommended removing parking time limits after 4 p.m. And I wonder if that might be something we might think about because it makes it easier for people to see dinner and a movie and not worry about that, running out of time, and yet it doesn't compete at the prime time that people are running downtown to do other things or for major employee parking. So,
okay, we can put that on the list. Or Ms. Stockton, did you want to respond to that?
I was going to just reply that actually evenings are probably more of the prime time because the character of downtown has changed to be more restaurant focused. And so I think that that's part of the Nelson Nygaard recommendation was to look at extending metered hours.
But do we need the turnover in the same way? I'm not saying don't continue the meters.
There are restaurant shifts, and they have employees coming in the evening and taking customer parking. It is something that's been considered.
So something that I heard more than once was on Sunday parking, and did I understand correctly? How long has Sunday parking? Has it always been?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is it seems like some of the complaints we're getting about the 2 hours and the Sunday parking are features of the system that's been in place for a decade. So that's been in place for I think at least since 2009. What's different is that it was extended up to Nassau Street, the Sunday parking, whereas before it was not on Nassau Street, but it was in most other areas in the CBD.
It was on some streets, not other streets. Yeah. It didn't completely blanket all of the metered spaces.
And for people in the know, it wasn't enforced. Okay. So a lot of the old system, there were rules on the books, and so I guess maybe that was another local discount, is that people from out of town were feeling like they had to pay, but they really didn't. So the new system is supposed to be, if it's the rule, it will be enforced, and so you don't have to play chicken with the rules that you're following.
So if it wasn't enforced and the people knew that it wasn't being enforced were just parking for free, I was wondering if we could explore, get the data on what the revenue is on Sunday parking and see if it's something that we could consider to possibly offer free parking on Sundays.
Okay.
I would just add, if I could, Mayor, that I think we need to consider the revenue implications of all of each decision discreetly. If we could get a number, because I think that the long-range planning that CFAC was doing at the time that I was coming off CFAC assumed a certain number coming out of the parking utility that was based on the rates that we adopted, and it's worth, I think it's worth sort of letting the public know too what the parking utility actually funds and why those, why that money is important. So I think we've all discussed ways that I think if we implemented them all, would probably not be revenue neutral. So I think as we consider each one, it would be great to have an estimate or some sort of number attached to it so that we know so we don't wind up during the budget meetings going, oh, we have this big hole that we have to plug.
Great. All right. And then before we do the ordinance introduction, I'm going to make sure we captured everything on this list.
I think we left out a couple of people mentioned better signage, better website, wayfinding. That whole bundle of things, I think, needs some real attention.
Right. Okay, good. And I think for a start, I see Christina out there. I know we have a project section on the website where we have something for the seminary. So it'd be great to have an initiative for parking, and we can start just filling that with the studies and other reports. So I can, between Deanna and I, we can send you a bunch of stuff to put up on the website in a place that where I think it'll be convenient for people to have it all in one spot, and it'll probably be convenient for us too to have a place to find everything. All right, is there anything else? Okay. All right, so we have the ordinance introduction, which is ordinance 2019-1, an ordinance of the municipality of Princeton concerning metered parking and parking rates and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974 to establish all-day parking on Witherspoon Street, Green Street to Lytle in lieu of the existing 3-hour parking time limit, to correct the table format of the Spring Street Garage parking rates. Oh, and to correct the table format of the Spring Street Garage parking rates. Is there a motion to introduce this ordinance?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen.
Second.
And seconded by Ms. Kremiller. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang? Yes. Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Kremiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
So this ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on February 11th, 2019, and that concludes our work session this evening on parking. And looks like we lost everybody, but if anybody's watching later, I do want to thank everybody who came and spoke. And this is it is like an emotional issue, and I think we all understand that. And I do really appreciate that everybody came here in a spirit of trying to work it out. So thank you. Thank you, Nancy. You're the one last solo survivor. And Tinica too. So thank you. And we appreciate it. And I was also going to say at the beginning, this was not our first discussion about parking, and it's not going to be our last one either. So, thank you for engaging with us, and we're hoping to keep making it better. Okay, so now we're on to our main other ordinance introductions for this evening. Ordinance 2019-2, an ordinance by Princeton eliminating proportional increase in floor area ratio on undersized lots and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And this ordinance is actually an important piece of our neighborhood character initiative, and essentially what it does is it eliminates a bonus that we had been giving for people who had properties that were undersized compared to what was required. Currently, you're allowed to build a slightly larger house than you would normally be allowed if your property is smaller than what's required. This would eliminate that. So if your property is smaller, you'd have to build a smaller house in proportion to everybody else in your zone. Hopefully I explained that in a way that's comprehensible, but not really. Well,
we can explain it again next time when we vote on it.
Okay, we'll have some. I see Derek out there. We're trying to save him the walk up to. I mean, more seriously, this is a really important ordinance. Are there any questions from council? Is there somebody who'd like to introduce it?
I'll move it.
It's been moved by Mr. Quinn, seconded by Ms. Fraga. Is there any discussion? Okay. There were a couple people who signed up to speak, but I don't think they came back. And I think I handed the list to Dolores. You see, I don't think they're here.
No, they took off.
Okay, so I will say that, well, why don't we take a vote on it about introducing it, and then I'll announce the public hearing. So, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Kremiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
So the public hearing for this ordinance will be on February 25th, 2019, and in the interim, it will be going to the planning board for their review, so there'll be two opportunities for public comment, the planning board meeting, and then when it comes back to council on the 25th. Next is ordinance 2019-3, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton authorizing the appointment of alternate members for the Public Transit Advisory Committee and Corner House Board, and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And essentially what this ordinance does is it allows for a couple of alternate spots on those boards so that we can engage more of the people who've signed up to volunteer. So is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Carmiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on February 11th, 2019. Next is ordinance 2019-4, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regarding the changes to the Civil Rights Commission and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And I want to thank Tommy and all the members of the Civil Rights, and Fern, and everybody who has been sitting here till we got to this point. So thank you for your patience. And Ms. Fraga, Mr. Quinn, do one of you want to explain this ordinance?
Sure. So as you know, there was a committee made up of Mr. Quinn, myself, and Mr. Lieberman, Councilman Lieberman, that reviewed the ordinance after the 1-year anniversary, where in the ordinance itself, it indicated that after 1 year we'd be reviewing the ordinance and make any necessary changes if needed. So at the end of this, I believe in December, was that in December when we made the recommendations? The committee made the recommendations for changes that are basically clarifying the conflict resolution process and highlighting that this is a volunteer process. It also, the original ordinance had limited the conflict resolution committee to 3 members, preferably with civil rights experience. So the changes that are being proposed would open it up to any of the Civil Rights Commission members who wish to participate in this subcommittee of conflict resolution, and but would also require that they go through training. So those are the changes. I also want to point out that when Council first passed the ordinance establishing the commission, it also passed a resolution approving the procedures, which included from intake to conflict resolution. And it's my understanding that after the ordinance has been, the changes have been approved, then we will take a look at the procedures to see what needs to be changed there. And we'd also expect to have input from the Civil Rights Commission that has already been working through the process and be in a good position to provide input on any changes that need to be made.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions about this ordinance, or is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn. Second. Seconded by Ms. Fraga. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Oh, great. So the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on February 11th, 2019. And I'm sorry, Mr. Parker, did you want to say something? You have to say it at the mic if you want to speak.
Thank you for introducing this bill again, and I just want to thank you really for the work that went into this. It's a key point that Ms. Fraga made, that this was actually introduced at the time that the ordinance was adopted, that there would be this review, and I don't think any of us anticipated the work that would go into that because it was about having the ordinance and the action that we are authorized by the ordinance to do kind of coincide. So in making it clear, I've read what's being proposed. It seems to be pretty clear what will happen when we introduce this tomorrow to the commission and we continue the work as it relates to the adopted bylaws and procedures. Is just really just kind of matching the wording. It's pretty much listed the same way as it is in the ordinance, and that's all I see doing. And again, I thank you and wish Mr. Lieberman were here. He's been a champion of civil rights for a long time. In paraphrasing how he implored us in December, let's do this. Let's get this done. There are a lot of folks who have been served over the years by this conflict resolution process. The other exciting opportunities that are going to come about with the program we do in our community dialogue and the Know Your Rights seminars. I'm real excited about what's getting ready to happen, and it could be more timely. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And just the events of Saturday made me really grateful. We have a Civil Rights Commission, and we're able to address a lot of the issues proactively because of the work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much. And come back again on February 11th for the public hearing for this.
And Mayor, are we sending this back to the commission for comment? They meet tomorrow night. So.
Yes, please. Yeah. And hopefully the commission has been engaged through this process, so they won't be telling us to go back to the drawing board on this.
I don't think there are any surprises.
We're ready to go. I know I can speak for them to say it.
Okay. Excellent.
So
but it would still be nice to get the commission's blessing officially for when we do the public hearing on this. So thank you.
I said we do have two other commissioners here.
Oh, right. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, the newest commissioner. So thank you. That's great. Okay, so now we move on to our resolution for this evening, which is 19-34, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Magic Touch Construction Company, Incorporated, via Educational Services Commission of New Jersey, contract number 65 MCESCCPS, for plumbing services for use by the municipality of Princeton in an amount not to exceed $75,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn. Is there
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Krummeler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next we come to the consent agenda. Are there any of these items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen and seconded by Ms. Fraga. All in favor?
Aye.
And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
He does need a bath, actually. That's this weekend.